The unexpected arrival. The atmospheric regulator hummed softly as Dr. Maya Chen adjusted the temperature for the third time that evening. 21 degrees Celsius, warm enough for human comfort, but cool enough for Celestian physiology, according to the cultural briefing files she'd memorized over the past week. Her modest quarters at the Thalassa Prime Research Facility had never received such attention. She'd pushed her cluttered work table against the wall, cleared away the scattered data pads and soil samples that usually covered every surface, and arranged the bioluminescent night blooms she'd cultivated in careful clusters throughout the room. Their soft purple glow was supposed to be welcoming to Celestian visitors, a gesture of understanding their preference for gentler lighting. Maya caught her reflection in the darkened window, her black hair pulled back hastily, her standard-issue gray jumpsuit wrinkled from a long day in the greenhouse. She'd considered changing into something more formal, but Ambassador Theron's dossier suggested he valued authenticity over ceremony. He was young for a diplomatic position, known throughout the coalition for his genuine curiosity about human culture, particularly their agricultural practices. His messages over the past month had been thoughtful, asking detailed questions about her research on cross-species botanical adaptation. She felt foolish for being nervous. This was simply a courtesy visit, a chance for Theron to see her work firsthand before the upcoming trade negotiations. Yet she'd spent the entire evening preparing crystal fruit preserves she'd never tasted herself, setting out refreshments on dishes she'd borrowed from the facility's ceremonial collection, practicing phrases in the formal Celestian dialect that felt clumsy on her tongue. The chronometer showed 3 minutes past midnight. The transport had been scheduled to arrive at midnight exactly. Celestians were punctual to an almost uncomfortable degree. Maya moved to the window, scanning the landing pad visible below her quarters, but saw only the usual lights of the facility's perimeter and the dark expanse of Thalassa's forest beyond. Then the door chimed. Maya smoothed her jumpsuit, took a breath to center herself, and activated the door panel. "Ambassador Theron, welcome to—" The words died in her throat. The figure in the doorway was not the slight, scholarly young age she'd been expecting. The woman who stood there radiated power that seemed to make the very air shimmer. She wore ceremonial armor that looked like liquid starlight captured and shaped into protective plates, each piece adorned with stellar cartography markings of the Celestian Military Command. Her silver hair was bound in the severe style of active-duty officers, and her eyes, the distinctive opalescent gray of her people, fixed on Maya with an intensity that felt almost physical. Maya's mind scrambled through her briefings, landing on the one face she'd seen in security footage and official broadcasts, but never imagined encountering in person. Commander Zephyra Solin, the sentinel of the coalition fleet, the architect of the peace that had ended 30 years of border conflicts, the most decorated military leader in Celestian history, and arguably the most powerful individual in the known systems. Dr. Chen. Zephyra's voice was lower than Maya had expected, with an accent that made the human name sound like a musical phrase. "May I enter?" "Yes, of course, Commander." Maya stepped back, her training overriding her shock. "Please, you're welcome, though I confess I was expecting—" "My brother's aid, yes." Zephyra moved into the quarters with the controlled grace of someone always aware of their combat positioning. Her presence seemed to fill the modest space, making it feel suddenly smaller. "My brother's transport experienced a significant delay, mechanical failure, nothing concerning, but he will not arrive until morning." She turned to face Maya fully, and something in her expression was impossible to read. "When I learned of the situation, I volunteered to come in his place. The Peace Summit begins in 3 days,
and I was told there was a human scientist on this frontier world who had captured significant attention in our diplomatic corps. The way she said captured made Maya's pulse quicken for reasons she couldn't quite identify. I'm hardly that interesting, Commander. I study plants. Maya tried for a self-deprecating smile, moving to the small table where she had arranged the refreshments. Please, sit. I prepared these for your brother's aid, but I hope they're appropriate for... They're lovely. Zafira hadn't moved toward the table. Instead, she was studying the bioluminescent flowers, her severe expression softening almost imperceptibly. You grew these yourself. Night blooms from Celestian's northern continent. Yes, they're part of my adaptation research. I've been working on developing strains that can thrive in human standard atmospheric conditions without losing their native properties. These particular specimens have been growing for 8 months. They're actually blooming more vibrantly than they would in their original environment. Zafira reached out slowly, her movements careful, and gently touched one of the delicate petals. The flower pulsed slightly brighter at the contact, responding to the Celestian biosignature. You tend to them personally. Every day. Plants respond to consistent care, to patience. You can't rush growth or force blooming. You can only create the right conditions and wait. When Zafira looked up, something in her opalescent eyes had shifted. And you do this alone, out here on the frontier. The facility has other researchers, but yes, this project is mine. Maya felt strangely vulnerable under that gaze. I prefer the quiet, actually. The solitude lets me focus. Does it? Zafira asked softly. Or does it simply feel safer than the alternative? The question hit closer than Maya wanted to acknowledge. She turned back to the table, using the moment to collect herself. You came to understand why Theron has been interested in my work. Would you like to see the research data, or... I did not come here for my brother's aid's interests. Zafira's voice was quiet but absolute. I came to understand why reports about a human xenobotanist on this remote station have occupied my thoughts for the past 6 weeks. Why I have read every paper you've published, every notation in your public research files. Why I found myself volunteering for this visit the moment I learned of Theron's delay. Maya turned slowly, her heart beating hard enough she was sure the commander could hear it. I don't understand. Neither do I. Zafira's expression was no longer unreadable. It was conflicted, almost uncertain in a way that seemed entirely wrong for someone of her reputation. But I am here now, Dr. Chen, and I find myself hoping you will help me understand it. The night blooms pulsed gently in the silence between them, and Maya realized that whatever she had prepared for this evening, it had not been this. It had not been the weight of those opalescent eyes on hers, or the sudden feeling that the careful, quiet life she had built was about to change completely.
The interrogation becomes connection. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she poured water into 2 glasses, a simple human gesture that gave her something to do besides stand frozen under Zafira's gaze. The commander had finally moved to the seating area, though she sat with the rigid posture of someone unused to relaxation, her armored form incongruous against the soft cushions Maya had arranged. I should clarify, Zafira said as Maya handed her the glass. My interest is not official surveillance. You've done nothing to warrant concern. Your work is exactly what you claim, botanical research that could benefit both our species. Then what is it? Maya settled into the chair across from her, maintaining what she hoped was a professional distance even as her curiosity burned.
Commander, I'm nobody, a mid-nubble researcher on a frontier station. You're the sentinel of the Coalition fleet. We exist in completely different worlds. Do we? Zephyra set down her glass without drinking, her fingers tracing the rim with unexpected gentleness. You read my military history. The conquest campaigns, the peace accords, the restructuring of 3 star systems. What you don't read is what it feels like to make decisions that cost lives, to carry the weight of millions of expectations, to be seen as a symbol rather than a person. She looked up, and Maya saw something raw in her expression. When I read your research papers, I found myself envying you. Envying me? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. Your work is about patience, growth, tending to fragile things and watching them flourish. Zephyra's gaze drifted back to the night blooms. Everything I touch must be strategic, calculated. I am very good at breaking things, Dr. Chen. I have spent 30 years learning how to win wars and negotiate treaties. But when I read about your orchids, the earth specimens you've spent 5 years coaxing to bloom in alien soil, I wondered what it would be like to create something instead of merely protecting what others have built. Maya felt her understanding shift. This wasn't an interrogation or even a diplomatic visit. This was something far more personal and far more dangerous. The orchids nearly died a dozen times. I made countless mistakes. But you kept trying. You didn't abandon them when they failed to meet expectations. Zephyra stood, moving toward the small table where Maya kept her most precious specimens, 3 delicate white orchids from Earth, their petals almost translucent in the soft light. May I? Of course. Maya watched as the commander approached the flowers with a reverence that seemed at odds with everything she'd heard about the warrior. Her fingers hovered just above the petals, not quite touching, as if afraid her contact might damage them. They're stronger than they look, Maya said softly, moving to stand beside her. Here, feel. She guided Zephyra's hand to gently cup one of the blooms. The petals seem fragile, but they're remarkably resilient. They've adapted to survive here. Zephyra's hand remained steady, but Maya felt a tremor run through her at the contact. You speak about them as though they're people. In a way, they are. Each one has a personality, needs, ways of communicating distress or contentment. You learn to read them if you pay attention. I realized I hadn't moved my hand away, that our fingers were nearly touching against the flower's stem. I suppose that sounds foolish to someone who commands fleets. It sounds... Zephyra turned her head, and suddenly they were close enough that Maya could see the subtle variations of color in her opalescent eyes, the way the light caught the silver undertones of her skin. It sounds like something I have forgotten how to do, to pay attention to small things, to tend rather than command. You're here now, Maya heard herself say, paying attention. Yes, Zephyra's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper, though I'm uncertain what I'm supposed to do with this attention now that I'm giving it. My pulse hammered in her ears. Every rational part of her mind screamed that this was dangerous territory, that letting herself feel drawn to someone of Zephyra's power and position could only lead to complications she wasn't prepared for. But there was something in the commander's expression, a vulnerability that seemed so at odds with her reputation that made her want to take the risk. You could tell me the truth, Maya said, why you're really here, not the diplomatic reason, the real one. Zephyra's jaw tightened, and for a moment Maya thought she'd pushed too far. But then the commander spoke, her words careful and measured. 6 weeks ago, I attended a strategic briefing about frontier research stations. Yours was mentioned in passing, a successful adaptation project, potential for agricultural applications in the expansion territories. The briefing officer showed your personnel file, one photograph.
She paused, seeming to struggle with what to say next. I found myself asking questions. Who was this human scientist, working alone at the edge of explored space? What drove someone to choose isolation and patience over ambition? The more I learned, the more I needed to understand. That doesn't explain why you're standing in my quarters at midnight instead of sending another message through official channels. No, it doesn't. Zephyra finally stepped back, though her gaze never left Maya's face. I told myself this was about diplomatic preparation, about understanding the human personnel who will be involved in the cultural exchange programs we're negotiating. I am very skilled at lying to myself, Dr. Chen. I have built a career on maintaining perfect control. This is what I am. Controlled, calculated, strategic. And, Maya prompted when she fell silent. And I realized tonight, watching you explain your work with such passion, touching flowers you've tended for years, that I have not felt anything uncontrolled or uncalculated in longer than I can remember. Zephyra's hands clenched at her sides. You unsettle they. This unsettles me. I came here expecting to satisfy my curiosity and return to my duties with clarity. Instead, I find myself wanting to know everything about you, not for any strategic purpose, but simply because the thought of leaving without understanding you feels unbearable. The confession hung between them, raw and honest, in a way that Maya suspected Zephyra rarely allowed herself to be. Maya's scientific mind tried to categorize what she was feeling. Attraction, certainly, but also something deeper. Recognition, perhaps. The sense of finding something she hadn't known she'd been searching for. I don't know what to do with that, Maya admitted. I don't know how to want someone like you. Someone like me? Someone powerful. Someone whose decisions affect billions. Someone who... Maya gestured helplessly. Someone who exists on a completely different scale than I do. Zephyra moved closer again, and this time there was purpose in the movement. Then perhaps we are both learning to do things we don't know how to do. You're learning to want someone you think is too different. I'm learning to want at all. She reached out slowly, giving Maya every opportunity to step back, and touched her cheek with unexpected gentleness. Is that something you would be willing to learn together? Maya's breath caught. Every practical instinct told her to say no, to protect herself from the inevitable complications. But when she looked into Zephyra's eyes and saw the hope there, fragile and uncertain as her orchids had been when she'd first planted them, she found herself leaning into the touch instead. I don't know if I'm brave enough for this, Maya whispered. You cultivate life in impossible conditions on the edge of known space. I think you're braver than you know. The night blooms pulsed brighter around them, responding to the shift in the room's emotional atmosphere. Maya thought about patience, about tending fragile things, and about the courage it took to try again after failure. She thought about the loneliness she'd hidden behind her work, the way she'd told herself isolation was preference rather than protection. Stay, Maya said. Until morning, at least. Let me show you the rest of the greenhouse. Let us see what this is before you have to return to being the sentinel. Zephyr's expression transformed. Not quite a smile, but something close. Something genuine. I would like that very much, Dr. Chen. Maya, she corrected. If we're doing this, you should call me Maya. Maya. Zephyra tested the name. Her accent made it sound like something precious. Then you should call me Zephyra. Not Commander, not while we're here.
The choice. The artificial dawn had fully broken by the time they made their way back to Maya's quarters, both reluctant to let the night end. Saphira had removed the outer plates of her ceremonial armor, revealing a simpler underlayer that made her seem more human, more approachable. She stood by the window now, watching the morning shift begin their routines across the facility grounds, her profile limned in golden light.
I should return to my ship within the hour, Saphira said, though she made no move toward the door. The summit preparations require my attention, and my absence will be noted soon. Maya felt the words like a physical weight. She'd known this moment was coming, had spent the last hour of their time in the greenhouse trying to prepare herself for it. Yet now that it arrived, she found herself desperately wanting to ask Saphira to stay, to forget duty and responsibility for just a little longer. Instead, she said, "Of course, you have obligations." "I do." Saphira turned from the window, and Maya saw the conflict written clearly across her features. "But before I go, there is something I need to ask you, something I had not planned to propose but find myself unable to leave without offering." Maya's stomach tightened with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "What is it?" "The Peace Summit will establish new frameworks for human-Celestian cooperation. Part of those frameworks include cultural exchange positions, liaisons who will work directly with both governments to facilitate understanding and collaboration." Saphira moved closer, her movements measured. "I want to offer you such a position. Your work here demonstrates exactly the kind of patient, adaptive thinking we need. You would have resources beyond anything available at this facility. Access to specimens from across the coalition, the chance to work on projects that could benefit both our species." It was a generous offer, the kind of opportunity Maya might have dreamed about years ago. Yet she heard the unspoken layer beneath it, saw it in the careful way Saphira watched her reaction. "And I would be based where?" "Initially at the Coalition headquarters on Celestia Prime, near the capital where the diplomatic corps operates." Saphira's voice remained neutral, professional, but her eyes betrayed her. "Where I am based when not traveling for fleet operations." "So, this isn't just about my work," Maya said slowly. "This is about us, about finding a way to see if this could be something more than one night?" "Yes." Saphira's admission came quietly, though I want to be clear, the position is genuine, and you are qualified regardless of any personal considerations. You would not be a token appointment, but I would be lying if I said that I was not hoping you might accept in part, because it would allow us to continue what we've begun here. Maya moved to the window, needing distance to think clearly. Below, she could see her greenhouse dome, the life she had built over 5 careful years. Safe, predictable, lonely if she was honest with herself, but protected from the chaos that came with wanting someone. "You're asking me to give up everything I've built here, my work, my home, my isolation, to step into your world, politics and power and complications I've spent years avoiding, to take a risk on something between us that might not survive the reality of your responsibilities and my fears." "I am," Saphira acknowledged, joining her at the window but maintaining careful distance. "And I know that is monumentally unfair. You have created something beautiful here, something that is entirely yours. I have no right to ask you to leave it behind." "No, you don't." Maya turned to face her. "But you're asking anyway. Because I am selfish enough to want you in my life, even though I know I have no guarantee I can give you what you need." Saphira's hands clenched at her sides, the only sign of her agitation. "I cannot promise you simplicity, Maya. I cannot promise you that my duties won't pull me away for weeks at a time, that there won't be political complications, that loving someone like me won't come with costs I cannot fully predict. What I can promise is that I will try, that I will learn how to tend to something fragile the way you tend to your orchids, that I want to know you, not for strategic advantage or diplomatic purposes, but simply because you have shown me what it might be like to feel something beyond duty and calculation." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Everything rational in her screamed to refuse, to protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak. Saphira was right. There were no guarantees, only the certainty that accepting would mean stepping into a life far more complicated than anything she'd ever known. But she thought about her orchids, about the 5 years she'd spent coaxing them to bloom. How many times they'd nearly died, how many mistakes she'd made, how many moments she'd doubted they would ever flower. She'd kept trying anyway, kept tending them even when failure seemed certain,
because the possibility of seeing them bloom had been worth the risk. "I'm afraid," Maya admitted, "of leaving safety behind, of wanting someone whose life is so much larger than mine, of not being enough when you realize how ordinary I am." Saphira closed the distance between them in 2 strides, taking Maya's hands in hers. "You are not ordinary. You are patient and brave, and you create life in impossible conditions. You kissed me even though you terrified me. You showed me your greenhouse, your sanctuary, and let me see the beauty you've built." Her voice roughened with emotion. "I am afraid too. Afraid I will fail at this, that I will hurt you without meaning to, that I will prove too damaged by duty to learn how to be gentle. But I find I would rather try and fail than never try at all." Maya looked into those opalescent eyes and saw her own fear reflected back. 2 people who'd spent years protecting themselves, suddenly willing to risk everything for the possibility of connection. It was terrifying. It was also, she realized, exactly what she'd been hiding from for too long. "If I do this," Maya said slowly, "if I accept this position and come to Celestia Prime, I need honesty between us. No political games, no using each other for strategic advantage. When we're together, we're just Maya and Saphira, not the Sentinel and her liaison, just 2 people trying to figure out if we can build something real." "I can agree to that," Saphira said immediately. "Though I should warn you, I am not skilled at personal relationships. I will make mistakes." "So will I." Maya felt a smile tugging at her lips despite her nervousness, "but I've learned something from 5 years of keeping finicky plants alive. You don't give up just because something is difficult. You adapt, you try new approaches, you stay patient." She squeezed Saphira's hands. "So, yes, I'll accept the position. I'll come to Celestia Prime, and we'll see if we can learn to tend to this thing between us." The relief that flooded Saphira's expression was so profound, it was almost painful to witness. "Truly? Truly. Though you're going to have to be patient with me. I've never done anything like this before. Left everything behind, pursued something I want rather than something safe. I'll probably panic and want to run back to my greenhouse more than once." "Then we'll build you a greenhouse," Saphira said simply. "At the capital, whatever you need to feel like you have a sanctuary, a place that's yours. I don't want you to give up everything, Maya. I want you to expand your world to include new possibilities, including the possibility of us." Maya laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. "You make it sound so reasonable when you say it like that." "Is it helping?" "A little." Maya stepped closer, resting her forehead against Saphira's. "Ask me again tomorrow when the reality sets in and I'm panicking about uprooting my entire life." "I will," Saphira promised. She hesitated, then added softly, "May I kiss you? One more time before I have to leave and become the Sentinel again." Instead of answering, Maya closed the distance between them, pouring 5 years of loneliness and the terror of new beginnings and the fragile hope she barely dared to feel into the kiss. Saphira responded with a passion that made Maya's knees weak, her careful control slipping to reveal the depth of feeling beneath. When they finally broke apart, both were flushed, breathing hard. Saphira's silver hair had come loose from its severe style, falling around her face in a way that made her look younger, more vulnerable. Maya reached up to tuck a strand behind her ear, marveling at the softness of it. "I should go," Saphira murmured, though she made no move to step away. "But I find myself reluctant to end this." "Then don't. Not entirely." Maya pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "When you leave, we'll stay in contact, real contact, not just formal diplomatic messages. Tell me about your days. Let me tell you about mine. Let's start learning each other before I arrive on Celestia Prime, so it's not quite so overwhelming." "I would like that very much." Saphira finally stepped back, her movements reluctant. She began reassembling her armor with practiced efficiency, transforming back into the Sentinel before Maya's eyes. Yet something had changed. The severity in her expression had softened, and when she looked at Maya, there was warmth there that hadn't existed before. At the door, Saphira paused. "The transport for your relocation will arrive in 2 weeks. That should give you time to prepare, to transfer your specimens,
to say whatever goodbyes you need to say." 2 weeks, Maya repeated, the reality of it hitting her. "That's not much time." "No, but if you need longer—" "No," Maya interrupted. "If I wait too long, I'll talk myself out of it. 2 weeks is perfect. Just enough time to prepare, not enough time to panic." She smiled, trying for confidence she didn't quite feel. "Besides, I've made harder transitions before."
New beginnings. The Coalition transport was larger than Maya had expected, designed to carry not just passengers, but significant cargo. She watched through the viewport as her carefully packed specimens were loaded into the climate-controlled hold, each crate containing plants she'd tended for years. Her hands trembled slightly as the last crate disappeared into the ship. Everything she'd built, everything she was, reduced to transportable units. "Dr. Chen?" A young Celestian officer approached, his opalescent eyes kind. "We're ready for departure when you are. Commander Selene has requested that you be given quarters adjacent to the observation deck. She said something about you appreciating the view during transit." Maya felt warmth bloom in her chest at the consideration. Over the past 2 weeks, Zafira had messaged her daily, as promised. Not formal diplomatic communications, but real conversations. About the frustrations of summit preparations. About her concerns for the peace process. About small moments that had made her think of Maya. In return, Maya had shared her anxieties about the move, her progress in preparing her specimens, her lingering doubts about whether she was making the right choice. Last night's message had been different, though. Simpler. "I cannot wait to see you again. The ship will bring you directly to the capital, and I will be there when you arrive. We'll go to your new greenhouse first. I want to see your face when you see what we've built for you." "The observation deck sounds perfect," Maya told the officer. "Thank you." The departure from Thalassa Prime was smooth. The familiar landscape of the research facility shrinking rapidly as they lifted into orbit. Maya pressed her hand against the viewport, taking one last look at the place that had been her refuge for 5 years. Part of her wanted to feel regret, to mourn what she was leaving behind. Instead, she felt anticipation. The journey to Celestia Prime took 3 days through Coalition space, each day marked by the increasing traffic of ships as they approached the heart of the Empire. Maya spent her time checking on her specimens, reviewing the briefing materials for her new position, and exchanging messages with Zafira that grew increasingly personal. "What frightens you most about your arrival?" Zafira had asked on the second day. Maya had considered carefully before responding. "That I won't fit into your world? That the reality of your life will be too much for someone who spent 5 years hiding on a frontier station? That you'll realize I'm not worth the complications?" The response had come quickly. "What frightens me most is that I will fail to make space for you in my life. That duty will consume me, the way it always has, and I will lose this chance because I don't know how to balance what I want with what I owe. That I will hurt you because I am still learning how to be gentle." They'd talked late into the night cycle after that. Trading fears and hopes and small confessions, Maya learned that Zafira collected human poetry, finding beauty in the emotional vulnerability humans expressed so freely. Zafira learned that Maya sang to her plants when she was alone, old earth songs her grandmother had taught her. The conversations built something between them, a foundation stronger than physical attraction or the intensity of that first night. On the morning of the 3rd day, the officer returned to her quarters. "We're approaching Celestia Prime, Dr. Chen. We'll be docking at the capital spaceport within an hour." Maya's stomach flipped. This was it. The moment where possibility became reality. Where she would learn if the connection she'd built with Zafira over messages could survive the complexities of their actual lives. She dressed carefully in the formal attire that had been provided for her arrival, not military like Zafira's armor, but elegant in a way that felt foreign after years in practical research jumpsuits. The deep blue fabric bore subtle embroidery that caught the light, and wearing it made her feel like she was putting on a new identity. The capital spaceport was overwhelming after the quiet isolation of Thalassa Prime.
Ships of every size and design crowded the landing platforms, and the terminals teemed with beings from across the coalition. Maya followed her escort through security checkpoints and diplomatic channels, her heart pounding harder with each step. Then they emerged into a private receiving area, and Zafira was there. She wore formal diplomatic robes rather than armor, the deep silver fabric draped elegantly over her frame. Her hair was bound in an intricate style that emphasized the sharp angles of her face, and she stood with the perfect posture of someone accustomed to official ceremonies. She was every inch the sentinel, commander of fleets, architect of peace. But when her eyes met mine, the careful control cracked. Relief and joy and something deeper flooded her expression, and suddenly she was crossing the space between them in swift strides. Maya. Just her name, but the way Zafira said it, like something precious, like coming home, made Maya's doubts evaporate. "I'm here," Maya said, and then Zafira's arms were around her, pulling her into an embrace that was probably inappropriate for such a public setting, but felt absolutely necessary. "You're here," Zafira echoed against her hair. "I was afraid." She pulled back just enough to see Maya's face, her hands framing Maya's cheeks. "I was afraid you would change your mind, that the reality of what I was asking would be too much." "I did almost," Maya admitted, "about 7 times. But then I'd get another message from you, or I'd think about spending another 5 years in safety but alone, and I'd remember why I was doing this." "And why are you doing this?" Zafira asked softly, though there was vulnerability in her eyes that suggested she needed to hear the answer. "Because I'd rather try and risk getting hurt than never know what we could be." Maya smiled, feeling tears prick at her eyes. "Because you make me want to be brave. Because somewhere between that first midnight conversation and 3 days ago, I stopped being afraid of what wanting you might cost and started being afraid of what not taking this chance would mean." Zafira kissed her then, gentle but certain, and Maya heard someone in the receiving area clear their throat diplomatically. They separated, both flushing, to find Zafira's aide trying very hard to look professional while clearly amused. "Commander, Maya's specimens have been transferred to the greenhouse facility as requested. The formal welcome ceremony is scheduled for this evening, which gives you approximately 4 hours to, get Dr. Chen settled." "Thank you, Theron," Zafira said, and Maya realized this was the young diplomat's delayed transport that started everything. He offered her a knowing smile. "Welcome to Celestia Prime, Dr. Chen. I look forward to discussing your research, eventually." He bowed and retreated, leaving them alone again. "Come," Zafira said, taking Maya's hand. "Let me show you what we've built." The greenhouse complex was located in the diplomatic quarter, a short transit ride from the capital center. Maya kept her hand in Maya's during the journey, pointing out landmarks and explaining the layout of the city with an enthusiasm that seemed at odds with her sentinel reputation. Maya found herself relaxing, letting the wonder of this new world replace her anxiety. Then they arrived at the greenhouse, and Maya forgot to breathe. It was magnificent, a sprawling complex of interconnected domes that caught the light of Celestia's sun and transformed it into something magical. Through the transparent walls, she could see carefully maintained environmental zones, far more sophisticated than anything she'd had on Thalassa Prime. "We used your research specifications," Zafira explained as they approached. "Everything is designed to support cross-species cultivation, but we also left large sections unplanned, space for you to expand, to experiment, to create whatever you envision." She turned to Maya, suddenly uncertain. "Is it adequate?" "Adequate?" Maya laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. "Zafira, this is incredible. This is beyond anything I could have imagined." "Then you're pleased?" The relief in Zafira's voice was endearing. "I'm overwhelmed," Maya admitted, "but yes, very pleased." They entered together, and Maya immediately felt at home despite the strangeness of everything. The environmental systems hummed with the same familiar tone as her old greenhouse. The scent of growing things filled the air. Her specimens had already been unpacked and placed in a temporary section, looking healthy despite their journey. "Your quarters are connected to the greenhouse,"
Zafira explained, leading her through a doorway into a spacious living area. "I thought you would want to be close to your work, but if you prefer something separate—" "No, this is perfect." Maya turned to face her, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of everything Zafira had done. "You built me a sanctuary. In the middle of your capital, surrounded by politics and power, you built me a place that's mine. I want you to feel like you belong here, not as an appendage to my life, but as yourself. The position is real. You'll have autonomy over your research, resources, staff if you want them. But this space, this greenhouse, this is yours to do with as you wish." She moved closer, taking both Maya's hands. "I know I asked you to uproot your entire life. I wanted you to have roots here too." Maya felt tears spill over, but they were good tears, happy tears. She pulled Zafira into an embrace that was deeper than their previous ones, pouring gratitude and hope and growing affection into it. Zafira responded with matching intensity, her careful control dissolving as her hand slid into Maya's hair. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Maya rested her forehead against Zafira's. "So what happens now?" "Now," Zafira smiled,